Welcome everybody to tonight's Joe and Joe Weather Show. It took almost to it took to the beginning of November, and we may have a Category 5 hurricane in Hurricane Eta as it nears the north coast of Nicaragua, near the border of Nicaragua and Honduras. Top wind's 150 miles an hour. We're going to talk about that. The busy wind that we've been dealing with here in the Northeast. Joe Rayo going without power today, Mr. Rayo, as the rumor mill was churning.
It wasn't so bad because literally 5 minutes after the power went out, I saw rushing down my street a truck from NYSEG with the lights flashing. So apparently they had a pretty good idea as to where the power had gone out, or they were roaming around in the vicinity. So we got power back about 20 minutes later. So thankfully, we did not have to wait a long time. I can tell you, my brother in law, who lives in Broadheadsville, Pennsylvania, called this morning around 9 o'clock or 8:30 and said that his electric company said they weren't going to get power back until 8 o'clock this evening. So who knows? Maybe he's still in the dark. But thankfully, we got the power back. Thankfully, we're here live with you, Joe, and hopefully we will not be
Yeah,
losing
we're
power
live.
again. Yes, yes.
Yes, exactly. And of course, the Joe and Joe Weather Show is brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware in West Babylon, New York, 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, 631 756 1125. They are Long Island's largest rock salt provider, so you're going to want them handy during winter storms when they happen this winter. And it's not just rock salt, but mag, ice melting pellets and flakes, Petalo premium snow and ice melter, biomelt, geomelt, spreaders, shovels, snow blowers, you name it. That's 1226 North Wellwood Avenue, West Babylon, New York. And again, the number is 631 756 1125. Best prices in town, omnitruevalue.com.
The only thing that's missing from that advertisement is the reporter standing in front of that big pile of rock salt. Because you know
Oh,
that
I,
every
I
time there's
I have a video. It's on Facebook if you want to see it
of a reporter standing in front of the rock salt,
about me standing in front of the rock
oh,
salt.
you in front of the rock salt.
Yes,
Yeah,
they
well, that's
got a
the
lot of
standard
rock
thing.
salt. They got a
Whenever we,
lot of rock salt there. So,
I mean, that's the standard thing. Whenever there's an impending snowstorm, and it doesn't even have to be a big snowstorm, but the assignment editor always sends somebody out to the local, like Omni, for example, to stand in front of the rock salt and tell you this is all going to go on the roadways beginning later,
right.
that kind of stuff.
Well,
It's standard.
I'm just gonna tell you that one of the big surprises when I went there, and I think you would love this. The owner of Omni, Judine Federici, she's an avid toy collector of back from the when we were kids in the 60s and 70s, and she has them in their original boxes, and they're on display. She owns a deli right next door, so they're on display there, Joe. It was like going back in time. All the toys that we had when we were kids,
Oh boy,
Batman memorabilia from when we were kids, you name it.
Rock'em Sock'em Robots.
Yeah, I mean all of that. Hands down. Remember the game Hands Down
Yeah,
yeah, uh,
Mousetrap.
yeah. I mean, it was just I think just to see them in their original packaging
Yeah.
and they're in excellent. We're talking about pristine condition, just as if they got them right off the shelf, and they're all available there. So, if you're ever in that area, or you folks at home watching, if you're ever in that area, go take a look. If you're into toys, you'll have a field day there.
Was it
Um,
didn't there was there an episode of Seinfeld where he was dating a girl who had a whole collection of toys in mint condition, and she wouldn't let Jerry play with them, so Jerry ended up bringing turkey and wine and knocking her out with tryptophan and overindulgence of wine,
oh,
and so here she is like this, and meanwhile George and Elaine and Jerry are playing with GI Joe the tasty bake oven, and it's funny.
yeah. I get it. I totally get it. All right, let's go straight to Hurricane Eta because uh, this is the Air Force reconnaissance aircraft is on the way there. It's not there yet. They actually have two planes en route, from what I saw, and they're going to find a powerhouse. Take a look on the latest loop, Joe. We're talking about the buzzsaw with the pinprick, perfectly circular eye. There, this is the hurricane force winds go out about 25 miles in all directions from the center, so it's not really a big storm, but it's inside that gyre that covers the western half of the Caribbean Sea. So there's this big amorphous upper air circulation that it's kind of embedded underneath. And the gales, I think, go out about 125 miles or so from the center. But this is going to come crashing inland tomorrow morning, and it could still, we may see this drop a little bit more in terms of the pressure. We'll see what the plane finds when it gets there. Maybe it'll get there while we're on the air. If they do, we will certainly report it. But very impressive here.
It is. It kind of reminds me of a storm that hit Central America. I'm guessing now, 15 or 20 years ago, Mitch.
There were some comparisons on a couple of the discussions today that mentioned that, because
Yeah.
Mitch, as I remember, became a Category 5, and it produced catastrophic rains in Central America. And then that's the big deal here with this big gyre that it's in. The rainfall amounts there are going to be historic, probably. And
30, 35 inches.
Mitch alone produced rainfall in feet. I mean, this is going to do the same thing.
Yeah, yeah. They called Mitch monstrous Mitch, and this one is no different. This looks like it's going to be in its own right a monster of a storm and a devastating storm for those poor folks who live near or around the path of the storm. Makes an interesting kind of curve actually up across Central America and trying to curves up and around toward Mexico, Yucatan area.
Yeah, well, now there's some debate about that, and on how this plays out, because does the center of this uh, could very well wind up just getting destroyed in the mountains there. But at the same time, you have again this big upper air circulation, and it looks like something else reforms. Either a new low forms, or certainly you probably will be able to argue that it will be the remnants of this that wind up eventually turning back up to the north. And I switched satellites here just to give you a different angle, so you can see the Eastern Caribbean versus the Western Caribbean, and the Hurricane Eta is right on the edge on the far left, which is so stands out like a sore thumb. And of course, you can see the high clouds on the outflow moving up over Cuba and into the Bahamas. So the entire western half of the Caribbean is covered by this. But if you look at some of the newer, the latest, well, this was the 18Z. I don't think we have the 0Z yet. I'll give it a. Oh, the 0Zs are in. So if you look at the 0Z hurricane tracking models, Joe, um, more and more of them are turning it northwestward and then turning it northeastward back out into the Northwest Caribbean. So you would have to say that it would probably be Eta, the same center. Now, there are a couple of them that are still lingering that want to take it out into the Pacific. Now, if that happens, you still have the issue of the big upper air, the spiraling gyre, and that the pressures here are so low that you probably will wind up with another low forming anyhow. So I think you're going to see something in the Northwest Caribbean in time, and then we'll see where it goes from there.
Well, Joe, as you mentioned yesterday, we're actually tied now with 2005. There was an unnamed storm in 2005. That's why they got as far as Zeta. They should have had one more storm, but they didn't name it. And now we've tied that with Eta. And the next storm on the list is Theta. And we might be looking at the outgrowth of Theta out of Eta.
Yes.
I'm not even going to try to go beyond that.
No, it sort of speaks for itself, I think. Beta, theta, eta, zeta.
I will say that if this indeed does turn out to be the
It's like an
cataclysmic
Abbott and
storm
Costello routine.
I mean, if this turns out to be the cataclysmic storm that it looks like it every bit is and will be to parts of Central America, that if we ever do use the Greek alphabet again, we mentioned that they don't retire Greek letters, but they simply will need to say Eta 2020, and everybody will know exactly
Yeah.
But that is,
Yeah,
yeah.
no question. So it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out, of course. And the last advisory here at 7 o'clock, they carried 150 miles an hour, 14.4 north, 82.4 west. Actually, if you watch the loop of this, it turned. It's been moving steadily west, but late this afternoon, it made a decided turn to the west southwest. So it's moving instead of moving at about 270 or 275, it's moving more like 250 or 255. And again, there's not much uh, left here of open water before it comes onto the coast, which it will do sometime tomorrow morning. Maybe it'll be as far as late as maybe 11 or 12, 11 o'clock or 12 noon. But in the meantime, conditions, unless it goes through an eye wall replacement cycle, which of course could happen at any time, it's just a matter of how deep does it get, how intense does it get before it does it. And the official forecast weakens it to a depression slash remnant low, but the Hurricane Center's buying the idea of a gradual turn to the northwest, to the west northwest, and then eventually to the north and northeast, back out into the northwest Caribbean sometime on Friday and going into this weekend. So this is moving so slowly, Joe. This is going to be around for quite a while. It's on the long range guidance in one form or another on the GFS anyway, and for 16 days. It's out. It's on the European for the next 10 days. So we're going to be talking about this, I think, for quite a bit. And why? And since we don't have any other weather impacting our area, because we're going to go exactly the opposite in terms of the overall pattern. But before we go to start talking about what's going on here, I just want to bring up just some maps of the model with regards to Eta, uh, and there. And by the way, Eta used to be what we remember the old Eta before before the NAM. We had the Eta model,
Right,
right? So
right.
it's a good thing we don't have it now, because then we'd be looking at the Eta to see what Eta is going to do. But
Yes,
you see, it moves inland on the GFS, and kind of loses it. It still shows a low there as it moves towards Belize, and then it emerges in one form or another. But notice how broad you have this. You have the hurricane, but at the same time, if you take a look at the overall picture here in the Caribbean, there's this very broad cyclonic flow with winds going like a giant low. And you just, if instead of watching where the low is, if you look at the streams of precip, you can see that there's turning virtually everywhere in the western half of the Caribbean Sea. That's the gyre that we're talking about. And if you go with the idea that the original center disappears, you'll notice that over time, because pressures are so low in the Western Caribbean, that you do get another low that pops up anyway. And this is what the models eventually take up. Now, on this run, it takes it pretty far northeast toward Haiti and the Dominican Republic, and then kind of reforms it. Like one low goes out there, then another one reforms near Jamaica, and then heads towards Cuba and points north. There's a lot of moisture here, so we're going to be hearing about not only the rains from the hurricane where it makes landfall, but for places like Jamaica, Cuba, the Dominican Republic, that whole area in the Western Caribbean is going to get socked with moisture for the remainder of this week and this weekend. And the other thing I think we should pay attention to in terms of the upper flow is the fact that we'll take a look at how it sets up in the Southwest Atlantic and into the Gulf of Mexico. So you can see the trough at the top of the screen is the trough that's moving through the east right now. Very intense. The southernmost part of it reaches down to about central Florida. And then in between that, you've got this very narrow ridge right in here. Okay, there's an upper high that's back out west of Texas, but this whole area in here is higher pressures, and of course this thing, Ada is kind of cradled underneath it, at least for the time being. But moving through time, when we take this forward, you'll notice the trough pulls out, and now you've got mostly high pressure to the north. So that's why this thing is going so far south, because you've got this ridge that goes from the southwest Atlantic back into the western Gulf and into Mexico. As we move toward the weekend, you start to get a weakness that develops here. You get this little upper low that forms in the northern Gulf, and that creates a large weakness in the Caribbean, and down into over Cuba and into the Bahamas. And I think we're going to see the tropical system somehow respond to this over time, and also very slowly going into next week. And I'm 10 or 11 days from now. This could wind up being anywhere at this point. This could very well wind up being just about anywhere. It's almost pointless to look at these long range models now when it comes in a situation like this, because the flow is so weak. It's too far south to get impacted from the westerlies. So that makes the forecast that much more challenging as far as the long term is concerned.
Yes, indeed. The doldrums, if you will, the storm with little movement, or not little movement, but very slow movement. Almost reminds me of the meteorological version of the movie Fantasia. You remember in the one part of that movie, Mickey Mouse decides that he's going to have the what is it to do all of his work for him, the brooms, and
Right.
and he tries to and eventually the brooms are taking so much water that everything is beginning to flood out. So he takes an axe and tries to chop the brooms, except every time he chops a broom, like two more appear. In this particular case with Eta, you figure that, well, we'll get rid of it once it moves over those tall mountains and makes a landfall or whatever. But as you point out, Joe, the gyre is so large that instead of just getting rid of it, it just kind of breaks and splits up into different different pieces,
Yeah,
which
it's going
can
to
can,
be a
can pretty much
challenge.
reappear anywhere, any which way.
I,
So it's
I,
we're
I
not. I agree with you. We're not done with this, and we're not going to be done with any of this for maybe another 10 days or 2 weeks. So we'll see. I think though we are going to be seeing out of all of this mess, we'll eventually see the record breaking theta come out of Eta.
could be. And don't get the folks at home, don't and weather geeks watching, don't get too excited from run to run, because we've already seen the models do very strange things. But it's sort of pointless to bank on any of it, because we don't really know how this thing is going to react with regards to the weak flow, with regards to how it eventually it winds up in the Northwest Caribbean, assuming that it does. Does it move northeastward? Does it hang around down there in the Western Caribbean? There's no flow, so we shall see. Let's go back home and take a closer to home and take a look at what's going on. And by the way, let me just remind everybody, my Patreon members on my my weather platform at patreon.com/meteorologist Joe Chaffee. I just want to remind you, at 9 o'clock is our Zoom meeting tonight, which we've been doing every Monday night at 9, at least so far. So I'll be putting up the links to the Zoom links to that at right after our Joe and Joe show is done. Joe, the wind advisories are done. And we're left with some winter weather advisories up in parts of upstate New York and northern Vermont and New Hampshire, and also for a small part of southern Vermont, and I think one county in northwestern Mass. Cold in the mid Atlantic. You've got freeze warnings and frost advisories down all the way to South Georgia. And the weather across the rest of the country is a snooze fest right now.
I know it's going to be a nice, lovely stretch here coming up later in the week. I pointed out on my Facebook page, Joe, that the Climate Prediction Center has placed our region, the Mid Atlantic, into most of southern New England in a 90% probability of above normal temperatures between November 8th, which is next Sunday, and the 12th, which is the middle part of next week. And whenever you see the probability go up to 90%, you have to start thinking about the possibility of near record temperatures. And for New York City, for Central Park, the record for that period, 8th to the 12th of November, is in the 73 to 76 degree range. So I would not discount the possibility of seeing temperatures as high as that for
Right.
Sunday into early next week.
The only way that does what may prevent that from happening would be the position of the high offshore, which depending on one thing or another, is there any kind of that's my only question. Could we get into a situation like we got into back 2 weeks ago and last week, where you got this stagnant high offshore, you've got a bit of a marine influence that comes in, you get into these low clouds and patchy fog that develop during the nighttime and early morning hours, and on some days it burns off, and on some days it doesn't. That's the one thing I would be cautious about in a pattern like this. Our winds today had some gusts up into the 50s. The wind was certainly very busy this afternoon. Just checking some of the observations shortly before 8 o'clock Eastern time. Still seeing some gusts up into the high 20s, but the stronger winds are done. And while the wind will remain rather busy tonight, it's not going to be what like it was during the day. The other thing is, the upside is, with all this wind, there's a lot of mixing going on, so I wouldn't expect temperatures to really drop all that far. We're probably going to settle in the 30s. The coldest spots, as you start to work your way northward through upstate New York and on up into New England, you'll start to see places that get down into the 20s perhaps. But as far as the coast is concerned, I think it's going to stay above freezing all night, mostly in the middle to upper 30s. And looking at the satellite loop as it is now loading, what it looks like, Joe, the upper trough is getting ready to move its last short wave through, and there's clouds moving northwest, southeast, western New York, western PA, back up to Lake Huron and towards James Bay. So that's the last of the upper trough. And then, folks, if you look out to the west, let me get rid of this. I'll just clean this up. But your deep trough here in the east, once that pulls out, it's upper ridge time that starts to move eastward, and once it gets in here, it ain't going away. We're going to have it for quite a while.
Indeed, it's almost like a balloon inflating. Kind of reminds me, in a way, of the big upper ridge that we saw during May and June, where places like Montreal and northern Maine were well into the 90s under that big ridge, and
Yeah.
we were a bit cooler. And it seems, Joe, that especially the GFS really wants to inflate that ridge over upstate New York and central and northern New England for Sunday and early next week. And that may very well be why the Climate Prediction Center is so confident in going 90% above normal temperature wise for that same time frame.
Right. So it'll be the places that get a west wind out of this that'll wind up probably setting records. If our wind here is more southwest or south, I think we may struggle. I mean, we'll still probably make it up to the upper 60s and lower 70s, but I think anything beyond that, that might be the upper limit. Again, it's all going to be about the wind direction and where the high is. Radar's got some patches of snow in upstate New York, a little rain in the mix too, coming off off of Lake Ontario into north central New York State, where they have the winter weather advisory. Otherwise, the radars are all nice and quiet. There were a few snow flurries today, a few snow showers on Long Island, and a few scattered around elsewhere. Radar's pretty quiet, though, up and down the East Coast. Really not seeing much of anything here. I'm just going to try to get that. I have another radar view that.
Well, I had a couple of renegade snow showers this morning, Joe. Was kind of surprised, actually. I looked out the window because most of the night it was clear, nearly full moon lighting up the sky. And I said,
Yeah.
oh, okay, that's wake up this morning at around 8 o'clock, looked out the window, and my deck was covered. I mean, again, just like it was on Friday, with just an ever so slight or thin coating of snow. It was pretty well gone about an hour later, but it must have been
But it
driven
was
all the way
there,
down
and,
from the
and,
lakes.
and they all the flakes count here. So it all goes into all gets baked into the cake. Here's the 21Z surface map. Low pressure that has now moved up further north toward Labrador, and you have the gradient is still on the tight side in New Brunswick and over Nova Scotia and in northern New England, but we're starting to see those isobars get a little bit of space to them over us. And now we're waiting for this high, this 1031 high in northern Mississippi, Once that starts pushing north eastward, and this last upper trough goes on through tonight into tomorrow morning, this little disturbance that's going by, then we're going to start to see the wind slowly relax during the day tomorrow with decreasing clouds, because I think there'll be some clouds overnight into tomorrow morning. Decreasing clouds, increasing sun. Further south you go, more sun. Further north you go, more clouds. But at the end of the day, everybody should have at least a halfway decent, fair amount of sunshine. And the weather prediction, folks, as far as those next 7 days, Joe, not a drop of rain from southern and southeastern New England, almost all the way back to about the Mississippi River. So we're going to be bone dry for the next 7 days.
Yep.
And the plains looks like they're going to get some moisture. The Rockies, north and south, and much of the Northwest, and even down into California, getting into some rainfall, because that's where the trough is going to be. It's going to be out in the west, and that means they get busy and we stay quiet.
I looked at the maps, Joe. There are going to be a couple of days from the 8th to the 12th of this upcoming week. I looked at the record highs for like November 8th, November 9th. It dated back to 1975. I somewhat remember that. Looked at the maps, and I got to tell you, the position of the high and the configuration of the upper level winds are somewhat similar to those very balmy temperatures of all those years ago. So that's why and also, you say to yourself when you get into a pattern where we reach, let's say, the low and mid 70s, and you look back like a week earlier and you're saying we were only going for mid and upper 60s because that's what the models were going for. I honestly believe that's what's going to happen here, is that the models, most of them are saying mid to upper 60s to around 70.
Yeah.
I think they're going to fall. I think if everything sets up just right, they're going to fall a few degrees short, and we're going to see temperatures roar into the low and mid 70s at the end of the weekend and early next week.
They're always playing catch up in a situation like this. They're always playing catch up, and you see that you see that a lot in the spring. They're never high enough when you have a ridge building up in the eastern part of the United States. It never seems like they're high enough when it comes to that. Our deep trough goes on through. This is the last one, and of course, you see that little arm that just sort of rotates back westward in eastern Canada. I'll just run it through again. So 1, 2, right in here. You see that up here. This is what's coming through for tonight. A very, relatively weak. And once that goes by, that's the mechanism to get the whole trough out. And then, of course, you see the ridge, higher pressures. It's just kind of a flat flow for the rest of the week, sort of a flat zonal west to east flow. But there are no weather systems of importance to really that are going to be carried along. And then as we go through the weekend, big upper high. There's Joe's upper high centered over Virginia, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey, and pushes up into upstate New York and northern New England. And meanwhile, you notice the very deep trough that pops down in the west. So this time of year, if you got amplitude on one side, you're going to have deep trough on one side means a big ridge on the other, and that upper high stays off the Carolina coast. We're up to next Wednesday on this upper air, Joe. We're going to probably have to wait till the latter part of next week before any kind of cold front has even a chance to get through.
Right.
And then eventually the ridge just flattens out quite a bit. But it's still there around mid-month, and you still have another deep trough that drops down into the west in the long range, assuming that that's correct. I don't know if it is, but at least seems like it's we could very well go through the end of next week without seeing a drop of rain.
It could very well be, Joe, and those temperatures are not too bad either. I beginning to think to myself, maybe this might be the best time to think about putting up the Christmas decorations before it gets too bitterly cold again, because it's not often you get a protracted or prolonged spell of 60s to around 70 or even above.
Yeah, it's no fun. It's no fun if you wait to a point where you suddenly got to have to deal with a cold air mass and very bad gloves.
Yes.
At least you can put them up with your bare hand right now.
So I'm going to answer a question on the chat board.
Oh, please do.
Both for you and I. Paul Roman asked.
Yes, this is my natural hair color, but go on.
Paul Roman asked, if I were given an invitation by the National Hurricane Center to go on board one of their hurricane hunter flights and take
No.
a flight into the hurricane, would I accept the invitation? I would say no, and I was going to say no for you too. There ain't no way you're going to get me on one of those planes to go into a major hurricane like
I've
this.
seen what those planes look like on the inside. The answer is no. No, no, and
Yes,
no.
yes,
Okay?
I agree.
Even if I'm heavily insured, the answer is no.
Right.
No, that's even I didn't even want to do it when I was young.
Yeah, there's some people out there who, when we were younger, I know a few of our peers or our colleagues who said, "Yeah, I'd love to do that." I would just shake my head and say, "Have a good flight."
Yeah, no, I'm not doing that. All right, so here we go for the rest of the week. It's pretty straightforward. Much of the country quiet. The Northwest, and then and the marine layer I mentioned, by the way, if you take a look along the southeast coast and down to Florida, you got these easterly winds. This is where it is a little problematic because you do get these showers that occasionally try to pop in from off the ocean, but we're not really in that line of fire. Uh, but you also, if you look as we get to Friday and Saturday, we do actually have uh, a couple of easterly isobars that run up from North Carolina all the way up into Maine because the high is out near Newfoundland. So that again, that leaves me a little bit of concern as to whether we wind up getting involved in some sort of marine layer over time. Over the weekend, it looks like high pressure is going to be right on top of us, so that might keep any marine issues out of the forecast. Might be a bit more problematic as you head down, say, to Delmarva, down into Virginia, North Carolina, but I'll worry about that when we get there. In the meantime, there's a low that comes out of the northwest, and there's going to be some snow in the northern Rockies at the end of the week. And that winds up going. The trough is so far west, Joe, that you take a low that goes from comes in Washington, Oregon to Idaho, and then it moves northeastward in through eastern North Dakota and heads up northward from there. I mean, that's how deep and how far left the trough is. So any fronts can't even have no chance of making it. Now the models have been telegraphing for early next week some kind of snow and ice event for the central and northern plains and maybe even into the northwestern Great Lakes. We'll have to see how this evolves over the next couple of days. But this particular run actually has about a half bad looking low running up in toward Lake Superior with some snow back to parts of the Dakotas and Minnesota. We'll see again. We'll see in the coming days whether that really does anything. You see Eta maybe or some form of it on this particular run, running into the Gulf of Mexico, and as we move out in the long range, just basically the remnant low moves westward and dissipates on this run. But I again, as I said earlier, you have to uh, exercise a little bit of caution, actually exercise a lot of caution on every single run of the GFS in the long range. I'm always seeing Joe, go on. We've got our own 24/7 chat on Discord, which most you folks can be part of if you'd like. But the I they put up the folks they're all sharing maps with each other, and again you kind of look at one particular run, you see it do it one thing, and then you look at another run and you see it doing something else. There's just so many variables here in terms of where the troughs, with the trough being in the west, with this gyre with a Category 5, almost a Category 5 hurricane embedded in it. All bets are off in the longer term. I'm just going to wait to see what the models bring us down the road, and I'm not going to get too worked up about anything at the moment.
But one thing that you would have to say, Joe, is that you say watch out for the GFS. The GFS, by far and away, of all the models, has done the best in terms of tropical cyclone projections.
Yes, I totally agree with you on that. And the
Yeah.
fact that you're seeing these from run to run, you're seeing all these different outcomes shows you how much trouble the models are having anyway. They're going to have trouble regardless in the longer range because of the variability, but even more so here because you have all of this weird stuff going on. I'll call it weird stuff because what I mean by that is it's stuff that we really don't see very often. So, and the models don't either. So they have a tough time figuring out what in the name of God is going to happen out of all of this.
Well, we'll see. You know,
Yes,
there are
we
a lot of
shall see.
a lot of people are asking a lot of questions about a lot of things that are going to be happening in the future. Not necessarily meteorology.
Yeah, no, I understand that, but
Yes,
we're
yeah.
not going there.
We're not going there. Yes.
All right, I think I got a Briller Jeopardy here somewhere.
Yeah. Can I just say one thing about the chairman has been mentioning on um, the chat board the last several days about how this coming Wednesday is going to be Joe and Joe Appreciation Day, the second annual Joe and Joe Appreciation Day. If he's referring to the fact that you know, last year when we were on our final day at um, Verizon FiOS One News, I think that was the 13th of November. Was that correct?
Yeah, that sounds right.
And I think that was the day that we had our last Joe and Joe physically together. So Scott has is marking Wednesday as the Joe and Joe.
I hope I can make it.
I mean, what I'm saying is that I said if there's going to be really a Joe and Joe Appreciation Day, maybe it ought to be the 13th of November, which would be, oh my goodness, Friday the 13th of November.
Now, do we know? Well, I'm not a superstitious creature, so um, I'm trying to find here, and all right. I'm just going to go back because we did have a Timothy Veltman messaged me regarding a Austin Belkowski on the chat board wanting to know the state of La Nina and how it's affecting the current weather. For those of you, so let me bring this up. I'm kind of working really fast on this, and I just pulling a graphic off of Wikipedia, okay, and you see it here in the Pacific. And this is a general. I'm not even sure. I don't know that this is even right now, but I'm just kind of illustrating for those of you that are not familiar with La Nina and El Nino, but it's this area here in the equatorial Pacific. You'll notice that the dark blue that is indicating below normal ocean water temperatures from the coast of South America and then westward across the equatorial Pacific. And when we have this condition, then this is the big reason we've had a strengthening El Nino. In other words, the ocean water here has actually been getting colder relative to normal through the summer and through the fall months. So this is a big factor in the fact that the hurricane season has been so incredibly active. It might even be the reason why it's been even more active, relatively speaking, from the end of October to the beginning, and now we're in the beginning of November.
It makes sense, Joe, because as we have said time and time again, the Earth's way of getting rid of all of that excess heat, that surplus heat that builds up during the middle and latter part of the summertime, is by way of hurricanes. Now, we see right there why the Pacific has been lagging behind the Atlantic in terms of hurricane activity. Hurricanes do not like cool temperatures and cold ocean water. So if the Earth is going to let go and let off steam, where's the best place to do it this particular year? It would be the Atlantic, and that's why I'm sure we've had so many more hurricanes and tropical systems there as opposed to out in the Pacific.
Correct. And if I'm just really fast trying to bring up the latest map from November 1st, and I just have it here. So I just found one from ospo.noaa.gov, which is where a lot of these sea surface temperature maps are. So I'm going
And
to
would you
bring.
call that what you just had, the map on the screen there? What would you call that? I would certainly not call that a weak La Nina.
No,
That would be
that's a pretty strong one. And in fact, Joe, take a
yeah.
look at this is the current look. And these are sea surface temperature anomalies. Look how below normal the ocean water temperature is across the equatorial Pacific, and this really explains just why you have uh, the Pacific was so relatively inactive. Because when you have a La Nina,
Right.
it creates wind shear conditions in the upper atmosphere in the eastern Pacific, but at the same time, it creates light wind shear conditions in general across the Atlantic. And another interesting thing, if you look on the Atlantic side, Joe, virtually the entire Atlantic Ocean is north of the equator is above normal as
Right.
far as temperatures. There are some really dark red spots in New England, off the New England coast and toward Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, showing much above normal. And then there's this big patch of below normal temperatures, which is interesting when you go out further east into the Atlantic and head toward Ireland and England. And then they go back above normal as you head up toward Greenland. So, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what, if any, implications there are with regards to this ocean water temperatures. I have found over the years that trying to make a bet on the kind of weather that you would get in the wintertime based on the ocean water temperatures is a very fruitless exercise
Yeah.
because folks will say, oh, if the ocean water is that much warmer, then that's going to mean that storms that are going to develop are going to be stronger. Well, not necessarily. If you don't have the right upper air pattern, you could spend the whole winter with storms going out to the west and you never see. We've had winters where we've seen very few lows along the East Coast, and the ones that we do have been very weak. On the other hand, I've seen winters where we've had colder than normal water temperatures in the wintertime, and these ocean storms we've gotten ocean storms that have become monstrous because of the fact that the upper trough and the position of the trough in the eastern part of the United States is I think, a far bigger influence and far more a bigger part of the equation than the ocean water temperatures are. I mean, I don't know if you agree with me on that, but honestly, I think it's a fruitless exercise.
Folks are asking about the typhoon in the Pacific.
Oh,
Somebody
the
wants to know about the typhoon.
The executive producer wants me to know that on the chat board, somebody is asking, or some people are asking about the typhoon in the Pacific.
All right, well, I haven't really looked at it very much, but I can certainly I'll pull something up. If you go to Tropical Tidbits, well, there's Gani, I think I'm saying it right, or Goni, and Atsani. So I'm not sure which one. All right, so it's not Goni because top winds here are 35. So let's go to Atsani. Maybe that's the one. No, this one's only 30 knots now, so I'm not seeing it here. I'm not seeing it here with regards to the typhoon. Let's see if this is the latest forecast. I believe this comes out of Japan, and it's taking it a track straight westward. Whatever this is in terms of development, it has it. I mean, it does take this one to a minimal typhoon heading south of Hong Kong, but I don't. I know there might have been one over the weekend. I saw a few mentions about it, but it's off his grid now, so I'm not seeing. So I'm not really seeing it. I really don't have. Honestly, I don't have the time to go look at this point.
Joe, do you think they would have 30 or 40 years ago the power of just like snapping your fingers and immediately you're looking at weather?
Oh yeah, no, I know it is. It's humbling in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Because you and I remember the day when that it didn't happen, so we can appreciate having all this information at our fingertips. But you also get used to it. So I'm kind of used to, I'm long used to the idea of being able to find whatever it is I need to find. It's just that I sometimes just need a little bit of lead time.
Thank you very much to Rosendo Benitez for your hitting super chats this evening.
Yay! We appreciate it. Thank you very much, Joe, and I always appreciate it when you hit super chat. Let's go to Briller Jeopardy here. You ready?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Question 1 from the chairman. What was the highest and lowest temperature in New York City for the month of November?
Well, I know that back in 1950, and 1950 was at the end of 1950 November, I think it was the 26th or 27th, there was a massive storm that went right up to the Appalachians with hurricane force winds. On one side, heavy rains, on the other side, tremendous snows. But before all of that happened, at the beginning of November of 1950, I think there were a couple of days where the temperature hit like 83 degrees at Central Park or New York City.
Very good.
As far as the coldest temperature, that I that I do not know. I'll take a wild stab and say that it's gotten as cold as, let's say, 26 degrees at Central Park
Oh,
in November.
ooh, Joe, way off on that one. 80,
Way
84 in 1950
right.
was the record high, all-time record high. 5, the record low in 1875.
Well, there were no steam engines back in 1875. So,
Oh, okay.
oh,
The
five.
question 2: how many times in November since 1869 has Central Park received at least 1 inch of snow for the month?
How many times?
Hmm.
So we're talking about like 160 some odd years, and how many times or how many storms have done that?
Yeah,
Uh,
151 years.
wow. I'll say it's happened. I'll say it's happened at least 85 times.
No, only 30 times.
Really?
Yes. And I think if you look back at the records, they're probably bunched up. Like in the 198 in the 18 late 1800s. Then there was a stretch where they didn't have very much, and then there was like an odd one that pops up here and there. And I don't know. It just seems like it's a once every 5 years or 6 years we wind up with an accumulating snow event in the month of November.
I
Most
remember there was
months you don't get anything.
I remember there was a big storm on Veterans Day 1968. In fact, it was so bad that people ran off of they stopped their cars and ran off the Whitestone Bridge because the Whitestone Bridge was was going up and down, was vibrating. That's how strong the winds were. And then I remember there was another one in 1987. There was snow, and there was a Thanksgiving 1971. I think that was the last time that there was rain and sleet and snow, and the balloons couldn't fly at all that year. My uncle Ron, who lived up in Mayopac at that time, had like a half a foot of snow. So yeah, those stand out, but
Right.
there aren't too many, major snowfalls in the month of November
Right. And the other part of this, the next part of this, how many times in November has the park recorded at least 5 inches?
of snow
Yeah,
in
at
November.
least 5.
Huh. There must be a date that I don't remember of recent.
Well, I think this is like total
Uh,
snowfall for the month, though.
total snowfall for the
Right, at least 5.
month. Well, I know that I mean the monthly average for November is like zero point 0.8, I think.
Yeah, it used to be one
So,
inch. I don't know
so why
what
don't we say
it's going to be on the new normal. So
why don't we say I don't know 1950? Did did we get snow? I think we got snow with that storm. I don't know if it was five, if we had a total of 5 inches for the whole month, but
well, the
so
answer is 6.
six.
Right, we've had it. It's happened 6 times since 1869.
Okay,
Okay. And if you look at the records, a lot of it happened a lot prior to 1910. If you go 1910 and back toward
right.
1869, snow in November was actually a fairly regular phenomena. And the last one on November 15th, 1933, this happened, and it's the latest it's ever happened.
The temperature got to 84 degrees,
80.
80
It's
degrees.
the latest 80-degree high.
Okay,
So November 15th, 1933.
wow, that's pretty good.
Shocking, but
Yeah.
true. All right, let's call it a night. Again, I just want to remind my Patreon members on my subscription platform, Zoom. The links for Zoom will be going up as soon as we say goodbye here, and that'll start at 9 o'clock. The waiting room will be there. I will be going in and out for a little while, and we're going to start promptly at 9. So just look for that in a couple of minutes. And you have any parting things to say, Mr. Rayo?
No, the only thing is that earlier we were talking about how neither you nor I would go on a Hurricane Hunter flight, and it was the question was then thrown out. Maybe Mrs. Rayo might want to go, And she basically said she would love to go and call the two of us chicken.
Well, she'll have to prep the plane first.
She said, geez, I would go. Those guys are no fun.
Yeah, no, I'm not doing that.
No.
And thanks, of course, to our sponsor, the Joe and Joe Weather Show, brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware, Long Island's largest rock salt provider. They're ready for winter. Are you ready for winter? Make sure you get all your winter weather needs filled at Omni True Value Hardware, 1226 North Wellwood Avenue, West Babylon, New York, 631-756-1125. So we will see you tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. Patreon members, 9
No,
o'clock on
7:30.
Zoom. 7:30, I'm sorry. Tomorrow night at 7:30. Old habits are tough to break. We're starting the Zoom video at 9 o'clock. So stand by for the links, folks. Thanks for hitting Super Chat tonight. That was, let me just check that again. That was Rosendo Benitez. Thank you again for hitting Super Chat tonight. We really appreciate it. All right, folks. See you later. Good night, everybody.
Bye.